Hello, my name is Umberto Guidoni and I am a former ESA astronaut, European Space Agency. I had the opportunity to fly twice in space on board the Space Shuttle. My first mission was in 1996 on board the Columbia, and was a scientific mission with an Italian satellite that was connected to the shuttle Columbia with a long wire, 20 kilometers long, and was called the Tether satellite mission, and was an idea to produce electricity, to produce power in space. It worked very well and was a great technical breakthrough. Unfortunately, the cable broke at the end, so we lost the satellite, but the scientific data were very, very important. On my second flight on board the Endeavour, I was involved in the construction of the space station. We were at the very beginning of the construction of the station. Our mission was the sixth in order. And we had the responsibility to bring the robotic arm, the Canadian robotic arm, on board the station, and that tools was used to build the station in the following years. So it was really a critical point in the construction of the space station. In addition to the Canadian robotic arm, we also had an Italian module. It was called logistic module because it was used to carry basically materials and spare parts from the Earth to the space station, but also to recover from the space station all the experiments that were already completed and to bring it back home. It is like a moving van that could be located in the cargo bay of the space shuttle. So this second mission was really a complete success, and we spent 10 years on board the space station at the time, and I had the privilege to be the first European to get into the space station at that time. The adventure begins in Florida, in this beautiful wildlife reserve near Cocoa Beach. Here is located the Kennedy Space Center, also known as Spaceport USA. The space shuttle is sitting on the launch pad 39A. It was moved several months before, already in the vertical position. Now we are a few hours before the launch, and the final preparation is undergoing. At T-3 hours, the astronauts leave the crew quarters where they were quarantined for a week. This procedure is adopted to prevent last-minute diseases that can jeopardize crew performances on orbit, but also to have them living together to build team spirit that is a key element for the success of the mission. The crew gets on the bus, still the same old bus of the 80s, at the beginning of the shuttle flights, and they are on their way to the pad. The convoy is escorted by police cars and helicopters. It's like living in a movie. If you have seen Armageddon, you know what I mean. Finally, the bus reaches the launch pad, and the crew takes the elevator to the level 195, where the catwalk to the space shuttle is located. One at a time, the crew members reach the so-called white room, where technicians check the parachute harness and the communication headset, also known as a Snoopy cap. It is quite difficult to get to your seat on the space shuttle. First of all, the hatch is so small that you have to crawl into it. In addition, with the vehicle in the vertical position, the seats are protruding from the walls, and you have to climb to get there. There are other technicians inside to help a crew member to reach their seats, to fasten the seat belts, to plug in the radio communication system, to connect the hose for the oxygen supply and for the water loop, used to keep a comfortable temperature inside the orange suit. This preparation takes hours. The mission clock is counting the last few seconds before launch. This is the viewing area where journalists, VIP and astronaut family and friends can watch the launch. As you can notice, we are more than 6 kilometers away from the launch pad. This is the closest distance you can be to safely watch the launch. At this time, no human beings are allowed to be any closer, with the exception of the crew, of course. Thanks to automatic cameras, we can have a better view of the launch. A few seconds before main engine ignition, powerful water jets are released to fill a pool that is located underneath the pad. Only a small amount of the smoke that you see is produced by the space shuttle. For the most part, it is the steam generated by over 1 million liters of water used to cool down the structure and to protect the space shuttle from the sound wave pressure that is generated by the three engines. The space shuttle starts moving up slowly. It is like a 20-story building going straight up. Here we see the interior of the cockpit during the first seconds of launch. At this stage, the fuel tank is fully loaded with 2 million liters of liquid hydrogen and oxygen, and the whole structure weighs more than 2,000 tons, metrical tons. Soon the shuttle starts to accelerate faster and faster, up to the point it became supersonics. You can see the shock wave generated by the transition to supersonic speed. This is just the first time. Before it gets into orbit, the space shuttle has exceeded the sound barrier 25 times over, reaching the amazing speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. After 2.5 minutes into the flight, we have the separation of the two solid fuel rockets. Thanks to parachutes, the boosters fall into the sea in a controlled manner and are recovered by ships to be reused, to be refilled and used again. With the exception of the fuel tank, all parts of the space shuttle can be reused after the mission. It is the first, and for the time being the only, reusable space vehicle. The space shuttle continues to full throttle into orbit until it runs out of fuel and the huge tank is released. When you get into orbit, this is the landscape that you can see looking down at the Earth. Almost immediately, we open the cargo bay doors, where the radiators to control the temperature of the spaceship are located. You can see views of the Earth, in particular the Moon that is setting behind the Earth atmosphere, and some views of the oceans. But there is not much time to admire the amazing landscape. The next step is the rendezvous with the International Space Station. And now we can see a view of the shuttle from the space station. It looks like a space truck with a small pressurized cabin, the cockpit where the crew can live, and a big cargo bay that in this case is housing one of the station modules. The shuttles needs to align, to do a final alignment with the station and perform what is called a pitch maneuver, showing the black tiles protecting the spacecraft from the scorching heating of the atmospheric re-entry. As the Columbia accident has sadly pointed out, the heat shield is a critical element for a safe return to Earth. Orbit after orbit, the spacecraft, the space shuttle approaches the station, and finally you can see the talking target. And looking at this image, you see at the top there is the International Space Station, and at the bottom is the space shuttle. Looking at that, it seems everything is still, but they are moving around the Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. After docking, the shuttle crew can open the hatch and get on board the space shuttle. Here we are back in 2001 when myself and the crew of STS-100 was getting into the station. For me it was a great moment. I was the first European to set foot on the International Space Station. In the Endeavour cargo bay there was the Raffaello module ready to be docked to the station. In recent years 2 more labs were added, the European Columbus module and the Japanese Kibo. Raffaello, along with his twins Leonardo and Donatello, are the Italian contribution to the station. And believe it or not, these names don't come from the Ninja Turtle. Looking down from the station, we can see some amazing view of the Earth. We are flying over California, and you can spot a lake in the middle of the desert land. On another orbit, we are passing over remote areas of China, often covered by clouds. And on the next pass, you may recognize the Himalaya mountain range. Mount Everest is just down on the right. And just next to it, we can see the blue-green waters of the Indian Ocean. We can move back on board to see live scenes of the station crew. A daily physical activity is required to reduce the effect of weightlessness. On orbit, human body undergoes significant changes. Blood and body fluids are shifted up so that the face looks puffy, and the eye pressure increases. Bones lose calcium and become more fragile, and the muscle tend to lose mass. Overall, the living conditions are very basic, with the personal quarters that have more or less the size of a phone booth. In this little habitation module, astronauts can sleep. You see the white sleeping bag just in the vertical position, and keep their personal belongings and have a little privacy during off-duty times. On board, 6 astronauts from various countries live together for about 6 months, doing all kinds of things. They have different nationality, diverse culture and native languages, but they share the same ambition to push forward the boundaries of human knowledge. Weightlessness is a strange, new condition you have to cope with. You may notice astronauts don't wear shoes, since they can float, they don't have to walk. And floating in mid-air, with no more references such as high and low, is quite amazing. This new perspective definitely changes the way you work and how experiments are organized. When you are freed from your weight, the ceiling, it is very easy to reach and makes sense to use it as a workspace, as well as the floor and the walls. Weightlessness affects everyday's activity, the way astronauts sleep, how they take care of personal hygiene. Just as an example, you cannot have a shower into the space station just because running water can go everywhere and make great damages. We are heading towards a new wonder of the station that unfortunately for me was not there in 2001. It's called Cupola, and with its 180 degrees view, it's truly the most beautiful window to look down at the Earth. It's, of course, it's the favorite place for the astronaut to take pictures of the most astonishing place in the world, but it's not there for that purpose. The cupola was added to function as the ISS control tower to monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. Here we have the 2 Russian Soyuz capsules, which they stay always docked and can be used as a lifeboat by astronauts in an emergency situation. But there are several other automated vehicles that can reach the ISS from the European ATV, Automatic Transfer Vehicle, to the Japanese H-2, from the Russian Progress to the most recent commercial spacecraft, like Dragon, made by SpaceX, or Cygnus from the Orbital Science. In the cupola, there is also the console to control the robotic arm, used to assembly or repair tasks outside the station, activities that often require human presence. By the way, installing the arm, built by the Canadian Space Agency, was our main objective during our mission in 2001. Astronauts venture outside to perform what is called an extravehicular activity, or EVA. In this case, they need to wear a spacesuit. The white suit is bulky, but is needed for the survival of astronauts in the vacuum of space. It provides enough pressure and oxygen to breathe, it shields the human body from dangerous radiation, and provides thermal control to overcome extreme temperatures, over 100 degrees Celsius in daylight and down to 80 degrees below zero at night. The robotic arm is also used to assist astronauts during an EVA. They are attached by their feet at the tip of the boom to be transported on relatively long distances. So it's called spacewalk, but as you can see, it's not exactly like walking. Astronauts are linked to the station with steel cables, pretty much like a mountain climbers, and they can move around with their hands using those yellow gold handrails that are everywhere on the station. Working in an EVA spacesuit for 6 or 8 hours can be uncomfortable. The pressure inside prevents the movement, and the helmet all allow only a limited view. Overall, EVA is a tough and risky business, but it's very important activity that made possible the construction of the station, one module at a time. After 10 days spent on the station, it's time for us to depart and say goodbye to our friends that will remain on board for another couple of months. We celebrate this moment with an Hawaiian dinner, as you can guess by the colored t-shirts. The station hatch is closed after us, and the same is done on the shuttle side. After a leak check, the two vehicles can start the separation sequence. And all the crew was ready to take picture of this moment. Now we can have a look at the space station from outside, as it is today, after completion. It is an amazing and beautiful structure, the size of a football field. You can see 4 solar arrays and able to generate all the power needed, and the pressurized module, the gray Modus cylinder where the astronauts live. The station goes around the Earth in 90 minutes, and half of its orbit is illuminated by the sun, while the rest is in darkness. Looking at the Earth with the naked eye, the lack of human presence is striking. We can see the California coastline and the US continental area. In daylight, you cannot see towns, highlights, or airports, but at night, you definitely see city lights illuminating the landscape. Those flashes you can see every now and then are lightnings of thunderstorms seen through the cloud. Here you can see Europe, Great Britain, the English Channel, France and Italy, the Alps and the Po Valley entirely lit. You may also see other areas of Europe, Greece and maybe Bulgaria on top. Here comes other areas of the world, Egypt and the bright lights of its capital city, Cairo, and of the settlement along the Nile River. But the most beautiful scene is the sunset, when the sun disappears and the pale blue halo is still visible around the planet. It's the Earth atmosphere, what we are used to know as the blue sky. On this scale is really a thin layer but it makes our planet such a unique place in the solar system. On board the Shuttle Endeavour, we are getting ready to our trip home. The first thing to do is close the cargo bay doors and to prepare the cabin for landing. It's time to put back the seats we had removed on orbit. We also have to don our orange suit needed for the phase of launch and landing. At the beginning of the re-entry maneuver, the Space Shuttle uses the two orbital engines to reduce speed and to start the free falling towards Earth. But it's still traveling many times faster than the sound, and the impact with the atmosphere generates shock waves that create a huge fireball and a red glow all around the spacecraft. The friction with the atmosphere reduces the speed, and at this point the Space Shuttle behaves like an airplane. Has wings, rudder, but engines are missing. They were turned off upon arrival on orbit. The re-entry maneuver is done with no engines. The shuttle flies like a glider, but it's heavy with short wings. It rather falls in a controlled manner, more like a brick, as the astronauts are used to say. With only a chance to land, the trajectory should be perfect. Indeed, the commander managed to put the wheel on the landing strip at the nominal speed of 200 knots. Here you see the culmination of the shuttle mission. Indeed, the landing of the last mission of the shuttle program on July 2011. The era of the Space Shuttle is over, but its legacy is still with us. The first winged spacecraft has been a key element for the human exploration of space. At the beginning of the space era, with almost no knowledge of the orbital environment, access to space was limited to military pilots. The arrival of the Space Shuttle opened up flight opportunities for a new generation of astronauts. For the first time, women could fly in space, as well as scientists and citizens from countries other than America and Russia. For several years, the Space Shuttle missions were targeted to the ISS, to the space station. Without the shuttle cargo capability and the contribution of its crew, the construction of the ISS would have been impossible. But that period is over. As you might know, the three remaining ships are in as many museums. In particular, Endeavour is now in the California Science Center in Los Angeles. Last year, I had the opportunity to visit the center and to show the footage on how they managed to bring Endeavour from the international airport to the center. It was quite impressive. After 25 missions in space, this final move was its last mission. The very same spacecraft that took me on a 8 million kilometers journey around the Earth was on showcase in a museum, and that consideration made me feel much older. With the Space Shuttle grounded forever, new manned spacecraft vehicles are being tested. NASA is working on the Orion capsule, just a capsule, no more winged space plane, but a reusable spacecraft able to reach the station as well as outer space, and to carry astronauts back to the moon, to dig minerals on asteroids, and eventually to set foot on Mars in 20, 30 years from now. But what is also very interesting is that the private sector seems to be playing a new role in the space business. For the first time, startups like SpaceX, Orbital Science, and big firms like Boeing are building new vehicles that can carry passengers into orbit. Here is the commercial spacecraft that Virgin Galactic is testing and will be used to bring tourists in suborbital flights. Passengers will reach an altitude of 100 kilometers and will enjoy the Earth view and the weightlessness experience for a short time. Our journey has started 50 years ago, and we have just made the very first step in the uncharted ocean of space. The next generation of space explorer will benefit of the experience gained by operating the space shuttle and the ISS, but they will have to face new challenges and cross new boundaries. This is what exploration is all about, and humans have been explorers since the dawn of their existence. I want to end my speech with the word of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, one of the pioneers of astronautics. Earth is the cradle of mankind, but we cannot live in a cradle forever. Thank you.